She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. There must be something about her features.
Story of a haunted house, better known today as the Sallie House. The Sallie House is located in Kansas, and it is said to be one of the most haunted houses in history and is still haunted to this day. So, now that you know that, I will get right into the story. The house was built in the 1800s. It was white, 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, and perfect for a small family. Deborah and Tony Pikmin moved into this house in 1992. They were so excited to finally own a house, especially due to the fact that Deborah was pregnant with their first child. Right as they moved in, they quickly made one of the upstairs bedrooms into a nursery. They noticed right away that lights would flicker, the phone would ring and no one would be there, timers would go off. But once their son was born, way more things started to happen. They came home one night and went upstairs to put their son to bed. When they walked into the room, they see that all of his stuffed animals have been placed in a circle, facing each other. Every single stuffed animal's hands were touching. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of the true story of one of the most actively haunted houses in America, known as the Sallie House. Deborah and Tony Pikmin walked into their baby boy's room to see all of his stuffed animals had been placed into a circle facing each other. All of their hands were touching. Deborah was just convinced that someone was messing with them. The couple put the stuffed animals back on the shelf and turned the light off in the nursery. They walked downstairs, and a couple minutes later, they realized the light in the nursery had been turned back on. They searched the entire house and found no one. Deborah and Tony Pikmin then called the family that used to live in the house. They asked the family if anything like this had ever happened to them. The family said that their children's toys would always be laying on the floor. When they would ask the children to pick it up, the children would always blame it on their friend named Sally. The parents just thought that Sally was one of their imaginary friends. Things start to get even more weird when the Pikmins contact a psychic named Barbara. Barbara can sense things in the house without even being there. Stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of the true story of one of the most actively haunted houses in America, known as the Sallie House. Deborah and Tony Pikmin got in contact with a psychic in California named Barbara. She can sense things in the house without even being there. Barbara says the Pikmins have a ghost. It is a girl between the ages of 5 and 13, and her name is Sally. The same name the family who lived there before said that their kid's imaginary friend was named. Barbara says that Sally likes them, but they need to make rules for Sally, because she's a child. Tony's brother George comes over later that night, and Tony takes a picture. Right as he took the picture, the bear in the corner of the room turns around. George got super freaked out, so he tried to move, but he was stuck. A presence was holding him back from moving. They were so freaked out that they grabbed Deborah and the baby and tried to leave the house. As Tony was almost in the car, something stings his back so hard that he let out a painful cry. Tony checks his back, and there were 3 long bloody scratch marks. Stay tuned for part 4. This is part 4 of the true story of one of the most actively haunted houses in America, known as the Sallie House. After being spooked and running out to the car, Tony picked up his shirt and saw 3 long bloody scratch marks on his back. Deborah calls the psychic Barbara back and asks if the ghost is actually friendly. Barbara thinks it is best for her just to come and see for herself. When Barbara gets there 3 days later, she can actually see Sally the ghost. She says, "Sally's just a little girl. She's nice. She doesn't want to hurt you." But Barbara does say that Sally doesn't like men. Barbara says the scratches on the back of Tony's back is because Sally was just excited. The Pikmins just have to tell Sally that that is not okay. Deborah Pikmin starts to feel a motherly love towards the ghost. Deborah talks to the ghost Sally. She buys toys for her. She even plays with her. One day, Deborah decided to buy Sally a doll. She gift wrapped it and put it in the nursery. Stay tuned for part 5. This is part 5 of the true story of one of the most actively haunted houses in America, known as the Sallie House. Deborah Pikmin started to feel a motherly love towards Sally the ghost. She bought her a doll, she gift wrapped it, and put it in the corner of the nursery. A couple days later, she sees the doll she bought for Sally laying in the center of the baby's crib. The weird thing is, though, the box that she put the doll in and wrapped so perfectly was still intact in the corner of the room. Not a single piece of wrapping paper was taken off. Deborah loves what Sally can do. But Tony Pikmin, on the other hand, does not like what Sally does. He hears scratching coming from inside the walls. He hears scary voices. Tony says that the voices sound like a whole bunch of people, not just one. One night, Tony comes home and sees Sally standing there in the kitchen. Neither of the Pikmins have ever actually seen Sally. They have just heard voices and felt her. But soon after, she disappears. Stay tuned for part 6.
Hang on. What if my hoodie is accidentally worn by my cousin Stephen, who thinks garlic is the answer to everything?
Molto bene.
No worries, the hoodie is machine washable and it won't lose its softness either. We had to make the hoodie life-proof. For families, teens, tweens and everything in between. Whether it's camping, hiking or playing hide and seek. Order your hoodie today and get that no pants, no bra feeling all day long.
Acne was something I thought I'd live with forever. I tried everything the chemist could sell me, but my acne wasn't going anywhere. Then I found Software. Software is stronger than anything you can buy over the counter because their service uses prescription-grade ingredients and customizes each formula to your skin goals. The doctor I spoke with was able to prescribe the ingredients I would need. After a few months, the results were clear. Like literally clear skin. So, if you want real improvement in your skin, visit skin.software.
This is part 6 of the true story of one of the most actively haunted houses in America, known as the Sally House. Just for reference, Tony and Deborah Pikmin and their baby are the ones who live in the house. Sally is the ghost of the house. Tony comes home from work and sees Sally standing there in the kitchen. None of them have actually ever seen Sally, but Sally was standing there in an old white dress. Just a couple seconds later, though, she disappears. Tony doesn't believe that this is just a little girl. He thinks it is more sinister than that. A couple months later, the Pikmins invited some friends over for dinner. As they were sitting in their living room, something scratches Tony's forehead so hard that it draws blood. Everyone watched the scratch go across his forehead, but no one saw what caused it. That same night, Tony had a dream that someone dragged him out of bed by the wrists. He woke up the next morning to bruises and blisters on his wrists in the form of child fingerprints. The family takes Christmas photos and sees a large, eerie figure in the photo. But it's not Sally. Stay tuned for part 7. This is part 7 to the true story of one of the most actively haunted houses in America, known as the Sally House. For reference, Tony and Deborah Pikmin are the people who live in the house with their baby. Sally is the ghost of the house. The Pikmins take their Christmas photos, and there's a large, eerie figure in one of the photos. But it's not Sally. They send it to a psychic, and the psychic says the person in the photo is an old woman. Tony was taking a nap one day when dust particles started to come together and form the shape of an old lady. The door slammed shut and everything in the room started to shake. It looked like the woman was about to strangle him. He crawls out of the bed towards the door, but the door won't open. But Deborah didn't even hear a thing from downstairs. A television show that specializes in ghost sightings hears about the Pikmins and wants to come to their house. The producers got there and they started filming right away. The first day of filming, something attacked Tony and left 3 large scratch marks in his arm. Tony was attacked a total of 11 times on just the first day of filming. Stay tuned for part 8. This is part 8 of the true story of one of the most actively haunted houses in America, known as the Sally House. For reference, Tony and Deborah Pikmin and their baby live in the house. Sally is the ghost of the house. After the producers of the show left, the Pikmins felt hopeless. They felt like nothing else was going to work. They finally get in contact with a medium who said that they would come and cleanse the house. The medium said that there was a little girl named Sally in the house, an old angry woman, and an old man. The medium asked the Pikmins if they wanted any of the ghosts to stay before she cleansed it. Deborah wanted Sally to stay, but the cleansing of the house didn't work. It honestly just made the spirits more angry. Tony kept hearing voices that told him to kill his wife, the baby, set the house on fire, things like that. The voices finally convinced Tony to kill a cat. But Tony doesn't even remember killing the cat. The Pikmins finally moved out 2 weeks later. Today, Atchison, Kansas rents out the house for tours. Thank you for listening. Story of the exorcism of Roland Doe. If it every single night at exact I'm going to be telling you the scary story of the exorcism of Roland Doe. It all started when Roland and his grandmother would hear scratching coming from the floorboards of the grandmother's room. They called an exterminator the next morning and they couldn't find anything that was causing the scratching. The weird part about the scratching is it would start every single night at exactly 7 p.m. and end at exactly midnight. The noise eventually moved from the grandmother's room to Roland's room. Roland started to hear someone every single night walk from one side of his bedroom to the next. Roland's mom was convinced that this might be their Aunt Helen. Helen had recently passed away and was really close to Roland. It made perfect sense if she was the spirit of the house. Later we would learn that Roland would always use an Ouija board in order to get in contact with his Aunt Helen. One night Roland's mom asked the spirit that was walking back and forth in Roland's room if it was Helen. She told the spirit to knock 3 times if it was Helen. 3 massive gusts of wind went over them and knocked 3 times behind their heads. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of the exorcism of Roland Doe. One night when the spirit was walking back and forth in Roland's room, the mom decided to ask if it was their Aunt Helen. She asked the spirit to knock 3 times if it was Helen. 3 massive gusts of wind went over their heads and knocked 3 times on the wall behind them. She then asked the spirit to knock 4 times if it was Helen. Again, 4 gusts of wind went over their heads and knocked 4 times on the wall behind them. The family was convinced the spirit was just Helen, until something started to scratch inside of Roland's mattress. They could physically feel something inside the mattress. And all of a sudden, just like that, the mattress started to shake and shake and shake. Vases started to fly across the room. One day, Roland was sitting in an armchair and it literally flew up into the air, threw him out of the chair, and flew backwards. The armchair was physically too heavy for Roland to even pick up. There was something else controlling him. Stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of the exorcism of Roland Doe. After everything that was going on, the family knew that Roland was actually being controlled by something inside of his body. They knew it was demonic. When Roland would actually get sleep at night, he would talk in his sleep a lot. But it wasn't talking in his sleep like you would normally expect from a person. He was speaking full Latin. Roland didn't even know Latin. The Doe family decided to finally take him to a Lutheran minister. The minister thought it would be best for Roland and his mom to come spend the night at his house. At about 3 in the morning, Roland and his blankets were on the floor and going underneath the twin bed. Roland's body started to shake viciously up and down, hitting the springs under the bed. But Roland didn't even wake up. The minister told the Doe family that there was nothing he could do and they needed to go see a Catholic priest. Roland started to develop long, bloody scratch marks all over his body every single night. But the weird thing was, every single morning when he would wake up, the scratches would just be gone. Stay tuned for part 4. This is part 4 of the true scary story of the exorcism of Roland Doe. Roland would wake up in the middle of the night to long, bloody scratch marks all over his body. But the weird thing is, those scratch marks would just disappear the next morning like they never happened. The Doe family decided that they would finally meet with the Catholic priest. Right away, the priest said that he could see that Roland was possessed. Roland didn't even know Latin, and in perfect Latin, he said to the priest, "O priest of Christ, you know that I am the devil. Why do you keep bothering me?" After hearing this, the priest sent Roland to a Catholic hospital where he could be cared for by nuns. At the hospital, the priest attempted his first exorcism on Roland. Before starting, they tied Roland's hands and legs to the hospital bed. Then, the priest started the exorcism. Roland managed to get one of his hands free and loosened one of the metal bedside posts. He took the bedside post and stabbed it into the priest's arm. Stay tuned for part 5. This is part 5 of the true scary story of the exorcism of Roland Doe. If you listen to part 4, we know that the first exorcism on him did not work. The priest who attempted that exorcism decided that he never wanted to try again. That meant that the Doe family needed to find a new priest. But the bloody scratch marks on Roland would not stop. One night, the word Lewis formed on Roland's chest. They found a guy by the name of Raymond Bishop who was willing to help Roland. Raymond sprinkled holy water all over the bed where Roland was sleeping. When he did that, they watched with their own eyes scratch marks form all over Roland's body, but they didn't know what was causing it. Raymond described it as if something inside of Roland was trying to claw its way out. Raymond knew that this was out of his control, so he got his friend who was a Catholic priest to help him. Then they got ready to perform Roland's second exorcism. When they started the exorcism, the priest called upon every single holy god to help him face evil. But things started to go downhill real quickly. Stay tuned for part 6. This is part 6 of the exorcism of Roland Doe. Before the exorcism, the priest and Raymond Bishop called upon every single holy god to help them with the exorcism. But things started to go downhill real quickly. They got to the part of the exorcism where they talked to the demon directly. He shouted at Roland, "I command thee, unclean spirit." Roland started screaming in pain, and you could see the scratch marks appearing all over his body. Every single time the priest would say God or Lord, new bloody scratch marks would appear on Roland. The priest asked the demon its name and when it would leave Roland's body. When the priest said that, the word hell appeared on Roland's chest in blood. Then, the Roman numeral 10 appeared on Roland's leg. That rose a lot of questions. Did that mean he would leave in 10 hours, 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 years? The priest got to his last prayer of the exorcism. He said, "I cast you out." And then Roland was just still, but just for a moment. Stay tuned for part 7. This is part 7 of the exorcism of Roland Doe. They got to the last part of the exorcism and the priest yelled, "I cast you out," to the demon inside of Roland. And then Roland was just silent, but not for long. He broke that silence when Roland started to sing. He sang so loud and moved with the music like crazy. They knew that this was still the demon controlling Roland. The exorcism had failed. If you remember from before, the Roman numerals 10 appeared on Roland's leg in blood. They assumed that they would have to do the exorcism 10 times before the demon left. Every single day, they repeated the exorcism again and again and again. Every single day they repeated the exorcism, the demon inside Roland kept getting more and more violent. They got to the 10th day, performed the exorcism, and Roland went silent. There was no signs of the demon, and there was no signs of the demon that entire week. The demon was finally gone, or so they thought. Stay tuned for part 8. This is the last part of the exorcism of Roland Doe. They believed the exorcism had worked because there was no signs of the demon. But one day, Roland didn't feel good and told his family to come up to the room with him. His eyes snapped shut and he was in a trance. The demon spoke through Roland and said, "I will stay 10 days, but return in 4 days. If you stay and become a Catholic, I will stay away. If you do not believe me, then Roland will suffer forever." The priest believed that if Roland was baptized in a Catholic church, then the exorcism would work. On the way to the church, the demon spoke through Roland and said, "So, you are going to baptize me and you think that will drive me out with Holy Communion?" And then proceeded to drive the family off the road. It took 4 times to baptize Roland. Once they went on to his first communion, it took them 5 tries for him to swallow anything. Then, the Roman numerals 18 appeared on Roland's thigh. On the 18th night of the exorcism, they decided to perform it in a different way. Maybe this would help. At the end of the exorcism, Roland, in his own voice, said, "He's gone." He was free.